I look like I'm from the Marie Antoinette era, like just like the big wigs. No, this isn't a wig. This is just like hair. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, the Beta 4 for the Elite Specializations. Very fun. Did you enjoy it? I enjoyed it. There were some interesting changes. Things I don't agree with, but then also things I was pleasantly surprised by. So today we're going to be talking about really the elite specs that I think still need some work, or just some interesting things that were maybe interesting, but I also found to be a bit more disappointing in terms of the direction that they took the specs in. So with this being said, let's begin with the very first elite spec, the Willbender. Now I'm a Guardian main, so I've been playing Guardian for quite some time. I know what it's like to play Guardian. I know the elite specializations. I'm very familiar with both Dragon Hunter and Firebrand. And when Willbender came onto the scene, I was extremely excited to see a new style of play that the Guardian has never really had access to. This being very up-close melee damage on an elite spec that isn't condition focused and is more power focused. And I really enjoyed the very first beta with the Willbender when the traits forced you to decide what you wanted to do. They were more so the traits that introduced the trade-off to Guardian, which I genuinely believe Guardian doesn't have a lot of trade-offs when it comes to their elite specs. So I thought it was a cool idea to pursue. Come Beta 4, they got rid of all that, and my main issues with Willbender, while I do highly enjoy the changes to the virtues and also the weapons and the utility skills, my main area of concern really is the traits. There wasn't a lot changed, or what they did change I felt was a little bit more confusing than what needed to be. So honestly, what I would do is I would revert all the changes for the minor traits, or the adept traits, I should say. So instead of Searing Pact, also, get rid of the condition line. Willbender's not Condi. Not everything in Guild Wars 2 has to be both power and condition focused. It bloats things, it creates a little bit of a scary situation. So what I would do is I would get rid of Searing Pact altogether. It's a minor trait, it's an adept trait, but it doesn't do a lot. It's just kind of weird. So I would replace this with the previous trait Boon Pact, and then I would do something like this. Gain 300 concentration while reducing boon application to allies by 50%, and then gain stacks of unblockable when activating a virtue. I think that'd be something cool for the top trait. As for power, revert this back to 250 plus power while you reduce minus 200 toughness. This won't be a 1-to-1 ratio, more so just giving you a little bit extra power while not necessarily taking away the equivalent amount of toughness. Additionally, I would transfer one of the master trait portions to this trait. This would be gain fury upon activating rushing justice. And then as for conceited curate, it was weak in the previous beta and it's just even weaker now. So don't really love it. What I would do is I would revert this back to gain 300 or like 350 healing power while reducing ally healing by 50%, and then additionally keep this new change that they did to this trait, which I actually really enjoy, which is Willbender Flames Heal You. I think this is a perfect portion that used to be on Holy Reckoning to implement it into Conceited Curate to make it a little bit more worthwhile. Next, as for Restorative Virtues, I don't like that it's alacrity focused, but I do like the idea that it reduces weapon cooldowns. So what I would do is return it to its previous trait, which is while a virtue is active, activating another virtue decreases the initial virtue's cooldown. I would also add on to this, triggering a virtue's passive effect reduces weapon ability cooldowns. So get rid of the alacrity. The alacrity doesn't need to be on the master trait. It's kind of redundant, I think. And just make this about reducing the cooldowns on virtues and also reducing the cooldowns on weapon skills. That's what I would do. And then as for Holy Reckoning, this used to be the trait that had the Willbender Flames Heal You, which is now in Conceited Curate, and also increase the damage, which in this beta was put on power for power. What I would do for Holy Reckoning is take the new trait Power for Power, where Willbender Flames do increase damage, and put this back on Holy Reckoning. I think it makes it more worthwhile. So I would like to see the damage return to the Holy Reckoning trait. Additionally, I would say keep the new portion where triggering a virtue passive effect grants might, but because I put the Fury on power for power, what I would do is put might and quickness. So 1 stack of might for 12 seconds and quickness for about 2 seconds when activating a virtue passive. One thing about Willbender is that it's very fast, it can get to the target, but you don't really have any minor source of quickness for yourself to prolong faster strikes, and nor do you have a lot of cripple application or immobilization application. So I think Holy Reckoning giving a little bit of quickness might make up for that. And then as for the Grandmasters, I did make a video about this a while ago, and I'm kind of just repeating what I'm saying now. I don't like Phoenix Protocol or any of the Grandmasters a whole lot. I think that they put too many drawbacks onto the Grandmasters. And I think if the Adepts already have those drawbacks, you don't need them on the Grandmasters. So Phoenix Protocol, what I would do is have Willbender Flames and Flowing Resolve's passive effect grant you Alacrity. And then of course, if you take the Honor trait line and you allow your F2 to be shared to allies, then that would function where you can do some minor group Alacrity application. But mostly I want this Phoenix Protocol to really strengthen the Willbender themselves. I want Guardian to be more selfish. I don't want them to start going into this like big group Alacrity provider, but I think minor is fine. Next, Tyrant's Momentum. The only thing I would do here is get rid of the lethal tempo duration reduction. Don't think it's necessary. I like the idea that, you know, lethal tempo, it's already a relatively short duration, so you already have to successfully strike targets. I don't think it needs to have a reduced duration. And the next death is Courage. I would also get rid of the Courage duration is reduced and the reduction to that. Don't think it's needed, but maybe I could see it being kept in World vs. World. Considering World vs. World, there are just so many enemies and so many targets to hit. What I would actually add to this is because it no longer grants you Aegis as its trade-off. Instead of granting Aegis, I would have it to where when activating your F3, Crashing Courage, you would gain 10 stacks of Unblockable. So we have a little bit more unblockable application, both on the Adept trait for Boon Pact in my idea, and then of course with Deathless Courage granting a lot more unblockable stacks. So overall, I want the top line to focus on selfish boon uptime, taking advantage of that bodyguard type playstyle, and then granting some alacrity and cooldown reduction to trigger skills more often. And then if you take a certain trait line, you can then share minor alacrity to allies. Middle line, I want this to be the assassin fighter. I want it to be like, you gain more power, you're slightly weaker yourself, but hey, your Willbender Flames do more damage, you gain Fury, you gain Might, and you gain Quickness, and your passive flat damage is increased with Lethal Tempo. And then as for the bottom line, more self-sustained focus with stronger conceded cure rate, Willbender Flames healing you, boons on Shadow Steps, and then the F3, of course, granting a little bit more of that bruisery unblockable stacks that I would like to see. Moving on over, the next spec that I think still needs some work, or I was a little bit sad to see, but also happy with certain changes, I just think it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, would be Harbinger. I'm not going to get too much into Harbinger, but as a whole, I think Harbinger is still missing that fun aspect, that interesting aspect, to solidify this as a Canthan elite specialization, and a specialization that is different from the other elite specs. So what I would do is I really enjoyed that they added the damaging aspect to elixirs. However, I don't think the damaging aspect of elixirs should be on the base elixir. What I would do, and as I did recommend previously on my video, would be to allow Harbingers to utilize elixirs while in Harbinger Shroud if they are using utility elixirs on their kit. This means that they would kind of revert to their old functionality when you're not in Harbinger Shroud. They would be self-buffs, and then also, with a Blight Threshold, to get rid of Blight. So when you're not in Shroud, they're used much more defensively, and to maybe take away a little bit of Shroud here and of Blight here and there, like 5 when you're at like 15, 20 Blight Threshold. What I would do is when you're in Harbinger Shroud, the If you're using any elixirs, they are now able to be thrown and can have their damaging aspects with the damage and the condition damage. And if you utilize them at a certain blight threshold, they do more damage in longer condition. Additionally, this would also keep their blight threshold mechanic to where if you're at 15, 20 stacks of blight, they do more damage. And also, I would have it to where Harbinger Shroud elixirs are the main bursty blight application for the Harbinger, and then of course having non-Harbinger Shroud elixirs be the one to remove it. I think having a little bit more duality to it would be interesting. They're almost like druid glyphs. I think having the elixirs be similar to druid glyphs would be pretty nice. Of course, there's the engineer with the elixirs and the engineer tool belt. You have that duality in the skills. So I think that's really the only thing missing on Harbinger. Additionally, you could have some trait changes, but overall I think Harbinger is on a good path. I just think they need to do a little bit more with it and kind of tweak how they've implemented the damaging mechanic with the blight and the blight threshold, and also the damaging elixirs. Just tweak it slightly, but everything, the foundation, it's there. Next is kind of the final elite spec that I really want to talk about in terms of needs more work. This being Virtuoso. I think Virtuoso is very confused as to what it's doing. I think it knows that it's going to be a damage spec. It just is confused as to how it's going to be doing the damage. Is it close range with a mental focus trait? Is it long range? Is it cleave? Is it single target? Is it AoE? Or is it Condi damage? Is it Condi cleave? It's a little confused. So I think what they need to do is have a slightly stronger idea of what the Virtuoso is, and additionally refine the traits. So what I would do is, as a recommendation, slot Virtuoso into that long-range damage dealer playstyle with the dagger and the shatters. What that means is I would have the shatter skills, the blade songs, the projectile speed would be increased slightly to make it a little bit more usable while in range. Additionally, I would change Blade Song Sorrow. Blade Song Sorrow is the shatter or the blade song that applies confusion. I don't think confusion is needed. Additionally, we have never really had a situation where the F skills fundamentally change what they actually do. F1 is always power damage, F2 applies conditions, F3 is your interrupt, and F4 is some defensive maneuver. What I would do for Blade Song Sorrow is get rid of the confusion altogether and have it to where you gain a second of Fury per blade used, because Fury application is actually pretty important to Virtuoso and their minor traits, but as a whole, the Virtuoso doesn't have a lot of Fury uptime and Fury application on the kit. You really only get it on Psychic Force, the utility skill. So Blade Song Sorrow I think would slot perfectly into that as your self-Fury generator. Additionally, Blade Turn Requiem, I don't know why it's called Blade Turn. I think you just need to like rename it to Blade Song for more cohesiveness. Next, for the dagger. What I would do for Flying Cutter is just increase the projectile movement speed to make it slightly better to use at range. Additionally, there is still a bug with the dagger to where if you are striking a downed ally 3 times or more, the flurry mechanic of the dagger will not actually trigger on a downed body. And this was a really big bug in the first beta, and it still persists today. Next, we have Unstable Blade Storm. Unstable Blade Storm, I don't think works as a 1200 range ability because you really want to use it close range to mid range to capitalize on the amount of blades that are shot out to deal damage. What I would do is, as we're moving in the more long range focused direction for Virtuoso, I would have it to where Unstable Blade Storm would act almost like a symbol where you place it at a location and over 3 pulses will just deal damage inside that storm. I don't think the blade shoot is needed, and in fact, I incorporated that into a trait, which all this feedback has been put on the forums, so I'm kind of using that as a script. So that's what I would do. I would have it to where Unstable Blade Storm read something like this. Conjure a telekinetic storm of blades at a location, dealing damage to foes in the storm. 180 radius, 1200 range, 3 pulses of damage on 3 targets. Something slightly more AoE focused, but able to be instantly summoned at range, and where you can stay in range, where you don't have to be like, I have to get closer to maximize the damage output. Next, utilities. We have the heal, Twin Blade Restoration. This ability is not great in terms of its functionality. You need a target to actually utilize the heal, and also you can't use it while running away when a target is behind you. So what I would do is change this ability to a ground-targeted road shape AoE, similar to that of Chrono Shield 5 or even the 1000 Cuts ability on Virtuoso. I would have it to where when using this ability in the road, the daggers fly out no matter if you're running, if you're retreating, if you're running to the side. And this also means that you don't need a target locked on to get the heal function out of it. If you just want the heal function, you can just pop this skill heal and the daggers could miss and you gain no bonuses, but you still get that heal that's really important. And then finally for the utility skills, 1000 Cuts. I like that they reduced the cooldown from 70 to 60, but I really think that this skill needs 2 charges to make it feel more of a worthwhile elite. As for the traits, this is where I think Virtuoso needs a lot of help as well. So for the traits, mental focus. I said this in another video. Granted, I didn't put this on the forums last time. I now have. Mental focus is wild to me. I don't understand why it's in game. I don't understand why this trait has been designed in such a manner. The spec lacks mobility, and it lacks a lot of connie clear or even defenses. So playing a Virtuoso in melee range is really dangerous if you're not using entirely core abilities to bolster yourself with a blink, with a taunt, with a better connie clear. And if you just want to play more so a strong Virtuoso range type, this is really strange. So what I would do is have mental focus be adapted to something more along the lines of a trait that we see on Dragon Hunter, Fear of Sight. What I would do is have this trait read something like this: increase strike damage, gaining more damage from further distances. So you would gain a minimum distance bonus, which is about 5%. If you're in melee range, you're getting 5% more damage. If you're at around 1000 to 1200 range, then you would be maximizing the damage bonus, getting around 10%, maybe even 12%. And then when you're more so in middle range, you're getting more of a dynamic increase in damage that we see on Dragon Hunter already. Now I'm going to talk about the bottom line with the Adept here. We'll go in the Adept Master Grandmaster format that we've been sticking with. Psionic Affinity. Or actually, excuse me, it's called Dragon Mind. I say, cut the fat. We don't need the connie line. Similar to Willbender, Virtuoso offers very little condition focus. Mirage, that's your Condi spec. You don't need to instantly create another condition spec. Very next expansion. Get rid of the traits. Granted, you have to put a little bit more work in making new traits, but I think this would actually really help the Virtuoso. So what I would do for the Adept line, Dragon Mind, I would replace this with a trait called Psionic Affinity, which focuses on your utility skills. Psionic abilities would grant Fury to allies in the area of their effects, or when a psionic projectile passes through an ally. We have a trait called Duelist's Reversal. Don't like the name. It kind of bleeds into the dueling trait line. So what I would do is rename this to Psychic Refrain. It's just a name change. It kind of goes with the psionic, psychic, telekinetic vibe. I just think a name change is better to keep it more cohesive. So this leads me to the Master Bottom trait line. I would change this trait, which is currently called Sharpening Sorrow, into Sharpening Storm. This trait would focus on the dagger, because as of now, Virtuoso does not have a utility focus trait, nor a weapon focus trait. So I would add, basically, I added both of them with Psionic Affinity, and now with Sharpening Storm. Essentially, this would make Unstable Blade Storm have the ability to fire out the blade projectiles that we currently see on the ability. Additionally, it would have 2 charges. And then additionally, as like your third thing to kind of go with the whole Fury idea, this trait would allow it to where granting Fury to allies extends the duration of Fury on the Virtuoso themselves. Next, we have a change talking about a current change that I kind of disagree with. As for the new change with Beta 4, they allowed it to where Virtuosos passively gain blades out of combat every 10 seconds. I really disagree with this idea. I don't love a lot of traits or just spec features that give you things out of combat. Additionally, visually, having things spawn in all the time and always having blades around you is a little weird. I was under the impression they didn't want those things with, of course, the Untamed change that they did. So it was a little like, the messaging was a little inconsistent. They're like, we don't want your visuals to always be up with Untamed, but we're gonna give you a permanent visual with Virtuoso. So I would say is I like the idea of a constant generator, but I don't like that it's by default. So what I would do is bake that concept into Infinite Forge. I would have it to where Infinite Forge, while out of combat, will stock a blade every 10 seconds. I think that's okay as a Grandmaster. It's impactful. It's almost like a preparation trait that you would take. Additionally, this would keep its similar function. When in combat, the rate of stocking blades is tremendously increased. So 1 blade every 10 seconds out of combat, while in combat, it'd be 1 blade every 3 seconds. And then finally, for the bottom trait line, this is Blood Song. Blood Song is the condition-focused Grandmaster. Once again, I think we should get rid of them. And I would change this to Blood Song. Each blade used in a Blade Song will remove a condition. Virtuosos don't have a lot of condition clear, so I think having the Grandmaster allow you to clear conditions pretty strongly would be a lovely Grandmaster to see. Do you want a blocking Grandmaster? Do you want a more consistent blade generator Grandmaster? Or do you want a condition removal Grandmaster? So Blood Song would read, each blade used in a Blade Song would remove a condition. Removing a condition stocks a blade and heals you slightly. As for the final 2 elite specs that I kind of want to touch on, Catalyst and Untamed. I just want to put them here. I like Catalyst and Untamed's changes quite a bit. I don't think I love the Catalyst Orb Hammer abilities. I think those should actually be the augments. I think if you use an augment in a sphere, you gain that like coil, you gain that orb effect. You already gain a small orb around your feet when you utilize them. So why not just play into that and have that be the interesting augment effect? So using your healing skill in a water sphere would give you that water coil or that water sphere, which would reduce condition damage that you're taking. If you use your fire augment utility skill, you gain that burning coil that deals fire damage and burning. If you use earthen armor or whatever the earth augment is in an earth sphere, you gain the rocky coil and you reduce damage by another 5%. I think that would also make augments much more worthwhile, and it would be less about using the hammer as a pseudo weaver toolkit where you're just constantly swapping into other attunements. I will talk a little bit more about this, and I'll actually post a forum post later on today where I give more direct feedback about this, and I'll probably have another video talking about both Catalyst and Untamed. But as a whole, I do think that they are better. I just don't think a couple ideas are worthy of still staying on the kit. So everyone, that was my video about the elite specs that I believe still don't really work and could use some updates. And these were just a couple recommendations that I had in terms of mostly trait changes. I think a lot of it falls on the traits at this point, but overall I think Beta 4 was really great. I think there was a lot of improvement to have been done, and there still is improvement to be done. So I very much enjoyed them. Thank you all for coming. Oh, hi there. Well, the video's over. Thank you so much for coming by. Comment down below your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you had to say, and subscribe if you'd like to keep updated with the channel. And if you'd like to help support the channel more directly, I have a Patreon down below. Special shout out and thank you to the new patrons Barley Ross, Steve Webba, and Boston Aran. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll catch you in the next video. I'm gonna go back to my computer now. You can stay on my bed if you want, it's fine. It's cool.